Welcome back. You are watching the Etch Play weekly live show with me, Adam Burt, and I'm joined now by the one and only Ben Joy. Ben, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks, mate. Not too bad. Yourself? We weren't very good at Outriders, were we?
No. But I mean, we got better after we stopped recording, which is annoying.
We did. That was really annoying.
Should have done another take. But you're joining me today not to talk about how bad we are at games, but to talk about a unique, specific kind of subculture within games and how it interfaces with the complex world of game creation and game marketing. We're talking about modding.
Yes, we are going to talk about modding.
For the folks at home who maybe have been, maybe never dealt with mods before, maybe they're a console gamer or they just, love Game Boys exclusively, you don't really get mods on those. What is modding and what's the kind of mod scene about?
Yes, so modding is essentially it's a form of user-generated content. It's for players of games to essentially go in and make development changes themselves and add on to the games to either enhance them, add new features, add new bits to your character. Basically, it's user-generated content that you can go in and create yourself on top of the game that already exists. So we're not talking about bands like The Jam, which are very good. And I'm not going to do the chant, even though I told Adam I would, but I'm not going to. So that's what modding is, essentially. And yeah, it's a huge community. And I think there's kind of some thought around it, like you have to be a really skilled developer to be able to do that, and that's not the case. Like you can do things from as simple as like in Minecraft, I think you can add like new skins to your character, and all you need is like a 2D art editor to do that, and you can do it. And then obviously you have the really in-depth mods where people can add levels to games and add features to games, and that is quite high level, and you need to be pretty skilled for that. So it's not new. It's not a new concept. It's been around for decades, and decades. So it's not a new concept, but it's a really big area of the games industry, and it's kind of a funny one because it's really important to players, and it's actually really important to development studios, even though it's kind of out of development studios' hands a little bit. They can provide kind of the playground and the access for players to do mods, but essentially what's happening is they're going, this is the game, and the players are taking it upon themselves. So it's great for the players because they get to enhance their playing the way that they want to play it. And I was reading a study that someone had done speaking to people who play mods, and the reason that they do it is for a creative outlet. It lets them get more involved with IP and games that they love and feel a part of it. And one really big part of it is feeling part of a community. Like the modding community is huge. As a community for modding is huge, and then you get mods within games, which helps enhance the modding community in that game, and then the community of the game as a whole. And we know how important, it's something we talk about a lot, how important community is for gaming. I think we mentioned it the other week, like 49% of 18 to 34-year-olds will play a game if they feel part of a community. So a huge amount of a very key demographic. So those are big reasons why it's good for players. In terms of why it's good for studios, is essentially it's almost like free additional development, because it's stuff being added onto the games that other players can play. So when you do a mod, it's not necessarily just for you. You can put it up and people can download that and they can play your mod. So essentially it's adding new features and more playable elements to a game that the development studio don't have to do themselves. They can focus on other improvements, other games. So it helps them along and extends the shelf life of their game. A lot is thrown onto mods for extending the life of Skyrim. People think that without the mods, and that's got a huge modding community and loads of mods for that game, that without that the game wouldn't really be as relevant as it is now, and people wouldn't be playing it because it still gets huge numbers of players. So without that, I think it would have potentially died away and be a lot lower numbers. And that's something we talk about a lot, is extending the life of games, and we often talk about it from what studios can do to extend the life of their game. And this kind of is on the flip. It's what can the players do to extend the life of the game. Typically, we're talking about what can a studio do to make sure the players keep on playing. Whereas here, the players are doing their own thing to make sure that they keep on playing, and subsequently has more and more people playing the game as well. I've talked for a while. Is there anything you want to say?
That's it. That's mods. No, I mean, I think it's worth, like for people who maybe don't know at home, like you kind of touched on this a little bit, but some of these things are just about like texture packs, like games age and the graphics that we're capable of creating on machines is progressively enhancing and getting better every year. So sometimes it's about taking a game that's older and making it look better, which is common. In Skyrim's had that a lot. Minecraft has that a lot. You can make Minecraft look like photorealistic if you really crazy. And then there's people who maybe invest more time in features and quality of life, which is also a really important aspect of what you're talking about with kind of extended experiences or experiences that last for longer periods of time. There's also quite a strong, at least in the corners of the internet that I frequent, which maybe is slightly different to yours, Ben. There's a strong, I guess, internet culture aspect to modding. Like people are proud of modding, and they also find maybe a lot of humor in mods sometimes. Like people at home might have seen videos of like Thomas the Tank Engine edited into Skyrim, or mods like that are created as memes essentially, but that take on a life of their own and kind of contribute to this cultural idea about games, or the continued discussion of games in online forums and places like that.
Yeah, and just to give kind of some semblance of scale to how big this is, so there's lots of different communities and hubs. So a couple of the big ones are mod.io, and Nexus Mods is quite a big one. And Nexus Mods, like they boast on their homepage that they have like over 306,000 files for over 1,000 games. They've got over 26 million members, and they've had over 4.5 billion downloads of the mod. So that's just to give some scale as to how big this is. And that's just the Nexus Mods community. There's other hubs, as I said, like mods.io, ModDB, loads of different places where you can get those mods. It's typically seen as more of a PC thing rather than console gaming. I think there are ways you can do it on console, but it's much more accessible on PCs if you're a PC gamer. But there are some thorny elements to this as well, where it can get a little bit complex. Obviously, as you mentioned, like Thomas the Tank Engine in Skyrim, there's walking the line of like copyright issues. So initially when you mod on a game, if it hasn't been opened up to mod and you've just been able to mod onto it, you're building on someone else's IP. So you don't own that IP, you're adding to someone else's IP. And also if you bring in popular culture into someone else's IP, you don't own that popular culture either. So that's where copyright issues come in. I haven't seen any huge stories with issues. There's been a couple of legal escapades, if you can say, with the people challenging mods because of use of IP. So that can get a little bit thorny. And the other side of it is, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's essentially a lot of this is free. It's people putting in their time, and it is really, really valuable to the games community and to game studios. And it's easy to kind of see that as free, but even though if people are volunteering their time and doing it for free, their time still has a value, and what they're doing is valuable. And especially when it extends the life of the game, it is valuable. So there's that side of it. It's like, how do you pay people for modding? Do you pay people for modding, or is it just something that people do as a hobby, and it's kind of taken that if you choose to do this, you're not going to make any money out of it? So Steam set up a thing in 2011, 2012 called Steam Workshop, which was essentially a community and a hub where you could put your user-generated content, your mods. And I think that worked as like a revenue share. So I think between 2011 to 2014, they paid out essentially $57 million to the people who had contributed and had their mods downloaded, which I think it equated to like $12,000 per person who'd upload it. Obviously, some people would have got more, some people would have got less, but that was kind of the average over a couple of years. So it's not, it's not big money, but if it's a side thing you do for fun, that's some money you can get there. I don't know whether they still do it. Bethesda did open up theirs to be some mods to be sold on Steam. I think there was some controversy about it. People didn't like that you could buy them, and then people didn't like it when you couldn't buy them. And that split of revenue, I think Steam was Valve, who on Steam were taking 30%, as they do with everything sold on Steam. Bethesda were taking 45%, and then the modder themselves was getting 25%. So even though they're doing all the work, because they don't own it, they don't own the platform it's sold on, they were taking the smallest share. So there are a couple of thorny bits around it. Another thing which I found interesting, which I didn't know some of this, like games are like very popular games have come off the back of mods. So CS:GO, Counter-Strike, came out of the back of a mod on Half-Life. Team Fortress came out of Quake. Gary's mod, as the title is, Gary's mod came out of, I think it was Half-Life 2 maybe, or Half-Life. And one which I really didn't know about, Plays Unknown Battleground, PUBG, that came out of a mod from Arma 3, and it's actually called that because the person who did the initial mod, their username was Player Unknown, and that's where the name comes from, which I didn't know until I started looking into this earlier this week.
Yeah, I know. It feels like ancient history now, but DayZ was also an Arma mod, an Arma 2 mod, which gripped everyone's imaginations for a little while a couple of years ago, when everyone was. I mean, you can still play DayZ. I think that's still a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are lots of popular games that have that kind of genesis, and I guess it reminds me a little bit of the way the music industry can be around remixing. You know, it's like sometimes you take things and you play with them and you change them around. You create something new, and that new thing is valuable in its own right as a separate entity, as something that's worth enjoying, as worth celebrating, worth selling. You know, some of those things are very lucrative. So yeah, I think modding is like an essential part of gaming culture and definitely of gaming history. So yeah, guys, I think it's a fantastic thing for people to encourage. Are there ways that studios can specifically encourage modding? Like if you're a studio launching a game, what are the kind of steps you should do to try and, you know you can't necessarily force people to do it, but to encourage and engender a community that works on mods?
Yeah, if you're doing that, you want to be really open about it and kind of give players that sandbox and just present it to them and be like, here's the sandbox to go and do these mods. And some are more open than others. Obviously, Bethesda have leaned heavily into it. As I say, like Skyrim has lasted as long as it has, very much down to mods is the consensus. And then you've got other studios like Rockstar who aren't as into it and not that keen on it, and depending on some of the mods that you do, like you can get banned. I don't know whether that still is the case, but you used to do that. So.
I mean, Rockstar, after the hot coffee incident, they don't want anyone playing with their game's code at all.
Yeah. So yeah, essentially just open it up and ask people to do it. And I'd say that's where it can come back to that thorny issue, is that it's essentially people are doing it for free and it's seen as free development. So you kind of, if you're a games studio, you absolutely want to embrace modding, because as I say, tying it back into how important it is for studios in the life of games. Unless you've been burnt like Rockstar, and you think your community is going to do something they shouldn't, which I think no one ever thinks that they would. Then yeah, absolutely open it up, because you can extend the life of your game, and that's essentially what studios need. And if people can help them do that without them having to do it themselves, then why would you not? So yeah, give people that sandbox, and I think you see it more from this kind of the sandbox style games, which I think is why so many. Like if you look down the list of games which have come off the back of other games, I think Half-Life and Half-Life 2 has so many that have come out of the back of that and gone on to be huge games themselves, not just kind of small games. I mean, like Counter-Strike and PUBG and even Team Fortress, which all come from 3 different games. They're huge games in their own right, which came off the back of mods. So it helps extend the life of games. It helps create new games, which is great for the people who do that. And it could be like a pathway in to a job. I'm not saying that's a conventional route, like I'm going to mod my way into a job. But if you're wanting to break into the industry,
it does happen.
A lot of these people who do the mods, they start from a very young age. They start when they're kids, and if you do that consistently, and it's a really competitive industry to get into. If you have that portfolio of here's all this stuff that I've done, and how many people have downloaded my mod and played it, like you're demonstrating that you can do it and get the attention of studios.
I think you have a lot more faith in the internet than I do in terms of like doing the right thing. Like when Cyberpunk came out, I was like, I give it 30 minutes before Keanu Reeves is naked in this game. But thank you for joining me and talking all about the wonderful world of modern